Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Stacy Rotter, and I'm proud to be a board-certified educational therapist. I'm on several committees with AET and also the program coordinator for CSUN's educational therapy programs. Okay. As someone who also shares a background in inclusion and inclusive practices, it is my pleasure to introduce today's presenter. Dr. David Palmer, EDD, is an award-winning researcher, ADHD certified educator, certified autism-informed professional, and is the founder and director of Inclusion Matters Educational Services, through which he is dedicated to supporting neurodivergent students and their families. With nearly 30 years of experience in education, Dr. Palmer has served as a high school science teacher, founded an K-8 private school, and worked as a learning needs specialist at a K-12 private institution. As a college instructor and father of 6 children, 5 of whom are adopted and neurodivergent, Dr. Palmer is deeply committed to inclusive learning environments and is a champion and partner in supporting neurodivergent students and their families. His passion for inclusion is driven by his belief that all students deserve the opportunity to learn and thrive, not just in school, but also in life. But what sets him apart is his deep empathy and personal connection to neurodivergence as someone who also lives with ADHD. In addition to his academic credentials and professional experience, David's commitment to inclusion is deeply rooted in his personal life. Stemming from his own experiences, he has a deep understanding of both the joys and challenges faced by neurodivergent students and their families, and uses his own experiences to inform his work and help other families. David loves spending time with his family, playing music, and telling corny dad jokes. His ultimate goal is to see his children live out their purpose and potential by serving others and solving problems. Dr. Palmer is based out of La Quinta, California, and we thank him for joining us virtually this afternoon.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stacy, and thank you everyone for joining us today. And I'm excited about this topic, so I'd like to jump right in. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Get started with our presentation. So we're talking about empathy unleashed, and I want to convince you during this time that empathy truly has the power to transform lives. And so I have a connection with educational therapy through my own children who have been in educational therapy, and so I appreciate the work that all of you do. And my hope is that this will be another great tool that you can have and use as you are working with various people. So with that said, we already heard the introduction, so I'm not going to go into all of this. I just want to reiterate the fact that I'm coming to you as not only somebody who has studied a lot about neurodivergence, special education, but also someone who lives with ADHD and someone who is raising neurodivergent kids, and I'll share more about them later. And then out of that, out of our family, came this desire to start Inclusion Matters Education Services. And right now we work with various families to make sure that their students are getting what they need in order to learn and thrive in school. So with that all put behind us, I want us to think about the lens that I'm going to be sharing with you today, the lens through which we're going to look at everything that we're doing. And we put it in the acronym of WCSBNA, which stands for Whole Child, or Whole Person if you're working with adults, Strength-Based Neuroaffirming Practice. And one way you can remember it, because it's hard to remember, I know for me, WC, all these letters, is that we put in a little phrase that is, we celebrate strengths and build new avenues. And that's what the lens we're going to have today is that we're going to celebrate even our own strengths as participants in this time. And we're going to build new avenues as we celebrate those strengths, providing new avenues, new opportunities, new ways in which we can see everyone learn and thrive. And so this is something that really every day I go to work, or when we're working with clients on Inclusion Matters Education Services, this is what we're looking at. And I put down what it really means to me. And first of all, I affirm that everyone is different and that difference is a strength to be celebrated. That's where we start. Everyone is different. Every brain is different. And so that difference is something that is actually a good thing, something to be celebrated. In light of that, we must value everyone's unique abilities and talents. We have to value them, not just acknowledge them and not even just affirm, oh, yes, you have this strength or you have this ability or you have this talent, but we have to value the person for that. And through that, empower them to create new possibilities, even possibilities that they don't believe can actually happen. I believe at looking at each person as a whole person, head, heart, and hands. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But we want to empower them in each part of them to be the best selves they can be. And so instead of focusing on the things that they might find challenging, definitely we don't put deficits at the forefront. We don't put disorder at the forefront. We put their strengths, who they are, and what they can do at the forefront. Now, that doesn't mean that we deny the fact that there are challenges and there are areas of stretch, and there are certain things that may be harder for some than for others. And we're not trying to focus on what they can't do. And definitely we're not trying to fix them or try to force them or shape them into a neurotypical model. But what we want to do is we want to enter into and affirm, celebrate, value their experience while being there to support them as they grow. So that's where I'm coming from. And so if you are there with me, that'll be great because it'll make sense as we go forward. A few quick disclosures here. I did receive complimentary registration for this conference. I've been able to pop into some of the sessions and they've been wonderful. I'm looking forward to going back and looking at those and being able to glean from those because they looked pretty amazing, but there's no other relevant relationships to disclose at this time. So what are we going to be doing? What is the brief overview? 3 things I want us to think about and be able to accomplish. First of all, I want us to explore the multifaceted nature of empathy. What is empathy? And so we will delve into some of the psychological, neurological aspects of empathy. So we're not just talking about heart or the affective part, we're talking about our thinking, our understanding, and then how empathy actually looks in our actions. And then how do we cultivate authentic compassion in ourselves and in others? And so that's where I want to get some strategies to you, like enhanced listening, validating, perspective taking, and show how we can actually show this kind of empathy and compassion while we're working with others. And then lastly, to discuss the broader implications of empathetic practice. And that is really goes beyond just our situations, our offices, our practices, but really joining together to foster a more inclusive culture. And we really need that. And reach out so that our work of empathy gets into homes, schools, communities, nationally, globally in scope. So that's where we're heading today. Empathy is a powerful tool, and I don't want us to underestimate it. I want us to understand that it is a powerful human trait that, first of all, allows us to connect with others in a deeper way. And you notice I mentioned before in the whole child perspective that we are, as people, head, heart, and hands, or I like to put it in the order of heart, head, and hands. And so empathy first is a powerful tool in fostering connections, okay? And it involves not only to be able to recognize, but also understand and share in the feelings, the thoughts and experiences of others. So it builds connection and trust. It creates this authentic understanding of others. So we're not making assumptions. We're not going off of what we think, but we're actually coming to a place, if we are empathetic in practice, we are truly desiring and working hard to understand others. And then empathy also allows us to build those skills and strategies that are compassionate and applicable to what we're doing. So it is a very powerful, necessary tool that we need as we do our work. And so I want to show you a little bit of what empathy means to youth, to children, to those who we might be working with. And so I have a quick video here I'll share with you, and then we'll continue on.
Empathy.
EMPATHI.
EMPITH. Oh, why?
I have no idea how you spell that.
Empathy is like what you feel, like how you feel about somebody.
For me, the word empathy means
And you put yourself in somebody else's shoes.
Like if a person's having a problem, you can help them because you know how they're feeling.
My friend, she was having some conflicts, and I was trying to see her point of view. Like maybe I have gone through it, or I know how it feels, or not. I just try to get into their shoes the best way I can.
I knew someone that they used to tell her that she was like a tomboy. Almost nobody was her friend. If I was in her shoe, I would have felt the same as her. I would have been sad. So then I started being her friend. I started eating lunch with her and playing around.
My friend's brother died. My friend Angel and I, what we did was that we made a banner and we made everyone in the class sign it.
It made me proud because I know that I could help someone feel better.
It's important to have somebody to look out for you.
When I first came to this country, I didn't know no English. I knew only Spanish. These girls, they sat next to me, and then they started being my friends.
I could tell how someone's feeling because
In their faces, like I could see if they're sad or mad.
I mostly look at their eyes.
I already know when they're shy and nervous. They just sit in a corner and don't play with nobody or speak.
If somebody's struggling with something, you want them to keep on moving forward. You don't want them to stay in the same place.
I will sit next to him and say, why are you sad? And if they say yes, I will help him out and make him feel happy.
If everybody can understand everybody else's feelings, everybody will be friends. Everybody in school will be friends.
Empathy. EMPATHY.
EMPATHY.
Oh, EMPATHY. There you go.
I want to take a moment and invite you to put in the chat some of the things that stood out to you when you watched this video. What are some things that, as you listen to these children, stood out to you about empathy and even their understanding of empathy? Something that may have struck you and said, oh, that, or something that you really liked. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Yes, wanting to connect and to help. It was profound. That's why I wanted to show this. First time I saw this, I thought, wow, this is amazing. Friendship, looking at through others' eyes, putting others' shoes. Do you think that these students just had, advocacy, I love that. Did they just have a mental understanding of it, or where did you see the heart, head, hand piece in their description of empathy? They acted on it innate, yes. Okay. I like that they had experienced empathy. And so being recipients of empathy helped them understand how they can be more empathetic to others. All right, a few more, and then we'll move on. I love these. These are great. So that you know, even though I can't see you and I can't hear you, I know you're there. And so I want this to be as interactive and useful as possible. I don't want to be just a talking head for an hour and a half. So as you guys are putting in things in the chat, it's amazing because that helps me also know where I can direct our time and make it most beneficial for you. So empathy involves, again, those three things: head, cognitive, understanding ourselves, understanding others, understanding situations that are going on. You notice one of those students recognized another student was going through a particularly difficult situation. Being able to see that and to understand that and to know, hey, this isn't right. That's a key part of empathy, because we can't really show and demonstrate empathy if we don't see that there is something to be, or someone to be empathetic toward. It's a heart, it's a feeling, okay? And I like, Sharon says, I see you, I hear you. It's not just I see you with my physical eyes, I hear you with my ears, but my heart is connected. I always love that part in Avatar where, you know, it's I see you. It doesn't mean I know you're there, but it's I get you. And then there's the behavioral or the hands or the action part of it. Okay, you got to act on it and sharing it. Now, we heard walking in others' shoes, and I think that's great, but I want to push it a little bit further. It's not less than walking in others' shoes. Okay, but I want to just push us a little bit further. And you see this in the video, that it involves actually caring about and valuing the other person. So we can kind of say, oh, I know what you're going through, excuse me, because I've been through that before. But when you're showing empathy in the moment, you're actually showing concern, true care, love, valuing that other person as a person. So there are these psychological and these emotional aspects of empathy, which has impact on our behaviors. And I know we're connecting in this talk, our practice with our research. And so as I was looking at different research articles, came across a few that were very impactful for me. One by Cuff et al. In 2016. They have an article called Empathy, a Review of the Concept, Emotion Review. And they focus on, again, the heart and the head components. And I love what they say. It's because empathy not only allows us to feel what another person is feeling, but to understand what they are going through and then acting on that. Davis in 2019, in their work, they were talking about this multi-dimensional concept of empathy, again, head, heart, hands, and that empathy really does play a vital role in our interactions with others. So the ability to empathize impacts the quality of our relationships. It impacts our understanding of others, and it even impacts our own emotional well-being. So showing empathy to others is not only good for them, it is also very beneficial for us. And then lastly, in a study recently in 2021, the researchers explored the experience of empathy in everyday life. And they said that empathy can be nurtured. So it's something that's innate. It's something that we have the capacity for as human beings, but it is also something that can be nurtured. How? Through giving attention to it, pointing it out, putting a spotlight on it, being committed to teaching about empathy, to modeling empathy. I like to say that empathy is often more caught than taught. We need to teach it directly. What is empathy, like we're doing right now? But one of the best ways through social interaction you can learn empathy is if I model that empathy for you, practicing empathy, setting clear expectations of empathy. As a teacher right now in a special education class, I, from day one, have set clear expectations for my students that we are going to be a class that shows care, compassion, empathy in what we say and what we do. And I'm seeing how that is building within my students an empathetic culture in the classroom. So even just the other day, I was teaching them in their ELA time about character perspective and what is it like to look through other people's perspectives. And we used different fables, different points of view, and how the characters are working and all of that. And it was just, one of them was Tortoise and the Hare, and just their insight into what the tortoise was thinking. And I mean, I wish I can go into all of it, but it was amazing to see how they were not only connecting culture to the story, but to their own classroom, and how they were encouraging when someone said, I don't get this, I don't get this. And it was funny when somebody turned around and said, no, it's that you don't get this yet. It's that growth mindset. And so we're modeling it. If I'm, as a teacher, as an adult, if I'm not modeling that empathy, and I'm saying things like, well, why can't you get this? Everybody else gets it. That's going to have an impact on the culture. And so we need to be looking at this fact that it can be nurtured, it must be nurtured, and there are all kinds of different ways. I love that metacognition. What do you feel when, what do you feel when this is happening? What is saying to you? Which, these are good questions that actually get others, as well as ourselves, to think about our thinking, to think about what we're feeling, to think about what our actions are saying and doing. And in the research, it's also interesting this. Many people fail to recognize opportunities to empathize with others. So it is innate, but it is not a given. So researchers have found that there are quite a number of people who will see a situation and fail to recognize that this is an opportunity for them to get in and to act. Also, in relationships, what I was just speaking about, they found that negative emotions are less likely to elicit empathy and can even decrease a person's well-being. Meaning, it is hard for us, harder, I should say, for us to show empathy when we get a negative reaction from another person. In fact, most of the time, if we try to do an act of compassion or try to enter into someone's experience and we get a negative pushback, we're more likely to back off and not show empathy, and it affects us. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is resilience, and that is, I talk to even my own children, and when I do these talks about, when we think about empathy, we're not always thinking about what a person may or may not deserve. And we don't do it because of how we want to be treated by them. We do it in the way that the Golden Rule says we treat others as we would want to be treated. We know that we need that empathy in times in our lives from others. And so that is what we're doing. And so we're not backing away. We're being wise. We're not being overbearing with people. I'm going to show you empathy whether you like it or not, but we also want to take into consideration those things. And then obviously, I think this was obvious, I don't know what you guys think, but people are more likely to empathize with those who are closer to them than with a stranger. So there is that relational aspect that researchers have noticed, but they also notice that the more confidence we have in ourselves and our ability to show empathy, that can actually enhance empathy and increase our well-being. And receiving empathy may make individuals more likely to empathize with others, but it doesn't necessarily increase the likelihood of being able to recognize opportunities for empathy. So take that research and just digest on it a little bit. When we get to a little break, I'd love to talk about the connection between empathy and restorative justice. That would be amazing. And then the tale of two wolves, Sharon, I think what you're talking about is the one you feed is the one who grows. Again, if we're feeding that empathy and we're feeding ourselves those things, then that's what's going to come out of us. If we're always being skeptical, if we're always doubting people's intentions, if we're always thinking people are just super bad, or when I deal with neurodivergence, they just can't read, they just can't feel, they just can't communicate. If we feed that part of us, that's what's going to come out of us. And so when we see somebody who's struggling, we're going to say, well, that's kind of what they get because they just don't get it. And really, unfortunately, I hear that a lot. even amongst teachers who are trying to get it off of the responsibility off of them and put it onto the students. And part of my job is saying, no, wait, let's step back and let's walk through this a little bit, and I'll talk to you about that. That's a good fact. I haven't heard that. When therapists are fully connected, their blood pressure and pulse aligns. And so it has not only a psychological, not only an emotional effect, but it does affect us physiologically and affects others physiologically. So when we're showing empathy towards others, if they're in a state of anxiety or something along that line, it really does have a lot of not only cognitive and psychological, emotional impact, but it also has an incredible physiological or impact on our body. And we'll talk a little bit about that more later, about that impact between the brain, body, and that. So empathy plays vital roles in relationships, and it's a powerful human trait that's going to allow us to be able to connect with others. That connection comes via empathy. And so that forms those connections. We can understand our students or our clients better. And ultimately, I believe we can provide more effective and compassionate support in whatever we're doing. Yeah, let's save that, Diana, as well. I want to talk about that too, that people on the spectrum lack empathy. I have some thoughts on that as well. So let me keep going here. We're going to keep those questions. I think Cara is also getting those questions gathered up.
Them all together for you.
Thank you, because they're amazing. Oh man, I'm going to try to get through this because I want to talk about the questions more. Most of us are probably familiar with Brené Brown and have either read her books or seen her speak or watched her YouTube videos. And so when I thought about doing a presentation on empathy, I thought who better to invite to our meeting than Brené Brown. But you're not actually going to see her. They have created this video based on her teachings on the 4 qualities of empathy. So I will let you guys enjoy this.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time. Because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So, I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now, I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So I want to pause here for just a moment. I think it was John Dewey who said, it's not that we learn through experience, but we learn by reflecting on experience. And so I want us to reflect for a moment. And again, I want you to feel open. I want to invite you to jump on the chat and reflect a little bit on what Brene was saying concerning empathy, how that ties into what we've been talking about here. I just want to give you an opportunity to maybe share some thoughts with all of us, and then we'll give you a few minutes here, and then we are going to continue on. I see that link there, Cara. What's that link?
I just wanted to put the link in what the image that you have up right now.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Mhm.
Empathy blockers. There are quite a few, and they are tricky. Yes. Gratitude. Oh, that's a whole nother presentation. But I think what Brene is trying to get across is there's a genuine, authentic type of gratitude in the situation. And then as you saw that, I don't know what it was, if it's a antelope or something, they're trying to force gratitude. Well, at least you should be thankful this. And so even with gratitude and how we're approaching with gratitude, we have to be very thoughtful as we're building connection, because we don't want to be just sympathetic. I feel sorry for you, or I have pity on you. I love the example she gives, and I was going to give the same similar kind of example of somebody who lost their job. Sorry to hear about that. That must be tough, versus really entering into their experience, walking with them, helping them through that situation. The point isn't to react, to connect. So keep that idea of connection. Oh, I like that about the mask. We cannot give empathy. And if you've listened to any bit of Brene Brown, and she even said it in the video, she talks a bit about vulnerability. And really, to show empathy, there has to be a degree of vulnerability. And that's hard for us. And so that's something that I want you to keep thinking about and ruminating on as we walk through this. Okay. All right, let's move forward now. So I wanted to give you some connection with me, some connection with where I'm coming from in this presentation. So this was my doctoral graduation not long ago. These people in the picture with me, you got it, they're my family. And so those are five. Let's see if I can turn on here my little laser pointer. So of course you guys know that's me. Excuse me for a second. And this is my wife, Laura. And we have an older daughter who's not in the picture. She didn't travel with us, but she is married. And then we have our kiddos here, all five of our kiddos, ranging from age now 18 to 11. They are all adopted. We adopted them when they were very, very, very small, and they are all biologically siblings. And when we adopted them through the process, we were just very thankful that, they came to us healthy, despite what they had gone through prenatal and after they were born, before they came to us, what they had gone through. We were happy. They had 10 fingers, they had 10 toes. They seemed to be, by and large, hitting those developmental milestones. But as they started to get near preschool age, school age, that's when we started to see evidences of their neurodivergence. And so whether it was discovering their ADHD or autism or sensory processing difficulties or hearing diagnoses of oppositional defiance disorder and borderline personality disorder and everything going on. We had to grow a lot. We had to learn a lot. My wife and I, when we were kids, we were raised in a very old school style of parenting approach. I can remember several times out of the best intentions and doing the best that they knew how to do, and then also carrying along how they were raised. You know, if we were going through a difficult time and maybe started crying or that, you know, our parents or grandparents would say, you know, stop crying. If you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And so that's what we grew up with, that very kind of mindset that I want to talk about a little bit, because I say it that way because my wife and I had to grow a lot, because we began to realize, raising these precious kiddos, that first of all, they had incredible strengths. And so remember, whole child, strength-based, neuro-affirming parenting was not the initial approach we took to the kids. And even we would get advice from well-intending people. Well, you know, you just need to do this and this and this. And we're like, we're trying these things. And what was happening was, instead of building connection, it was driving wedges. And so my wife, Laura, is the incredible researcher that she is. She spent a lot of time starting to delve in and truly understand our kiddos. And then as I'm at that time teaching high school science and working with older students, I'm beginning to see in my older students these traces of things that are going on in their lives that are not being addressed, but rather they're being addressed, but they were being addressed in ways such as, you're just lazy. Can you stop being lazy? Can you just do your work? Why are you trying to show off all the time? I didn't understand about attachment and connection. I wasn't trauma informed at the time. I didn't realize the impact. And one of actually the first things we started to come across was this idea of Dr. Karen Purvis, who was at TCU, and she was talking about trust-based parenting and how trauma affects. So that got me to the point of saying, I'm seeing this as a dad, I'm seeing this as a professional. And so I went back to school and I got my doctorate in special education and have since gotten all kinds of certifications, and I am learning and studying all the time, not so I have all this knowledge in my head, but that I could be a more empathetic person. And so, you know, when the kids are having a moment where I'm getting triggered, I have to stop and say, okay, what's triggering me? Because when I'm triggered, I'm probably going to react in such a way that it's going to trigger them even further. And, you know, so whether it's whatever kind of divergence, as I said before, every brain is different. And so it's not any longer, although we still tend to go back to these ways, I'll be honest with you. You know, how many, you get frustrated as a parent, right? As an adult, how many times do I have to tell you? And if I'm saying that a lot, it's not the child who's not listening. I'm not getting it. And so where empathy comes into this is you're looking at it not as what's wrong with you, but you're looking at it as what's strong with you. And so whether it's one of my kiddos who is just incredibly artistic and creative and drawing, now doing all these cartoons on the iPad. One of these kiddos is just incredibly mechanically inclined and doesn't need instructions. You know, when we got IKEA stuff, I'm like pulling out the instructions and, you know, you were on number, 12 of 155. But he can come along and just has an intuition about that. And so what we've been trying to do is use those strengths to help them overcome their challenges with maybe difficulties in readings. One of them has a very, very fiery personality, you know, and so healthcare, they have put on them, well, they're ODD, or they have reactive disorder, and we're like, okay, we get that, okay, but how can we take that and not just say this is the way you are and this is the way you will always be and that's it, but how can we see that fiery passion? And now as they get older, and they're all teenagers now, we're seeing ways in which that passion can be used for things like justice and empathy and compassion. Sometimes we see our kids, you know, they're really into this, that's not fair thing. And then we're like, well, you know, our typical adult response is, well, life's not fair. But we're kind of thinking through now, okay, you see this injustice in the world. What can we do to help you connect your strengths with that passion so that who you are and what you can do can actually benefit the world in which, and shape the world in which you live? So there are a few things that I just want to tell you that I've learned, and I'm still in the school of empathy, okay? And that is understanding triggers, not only what triggers others, but I understand more what triggers me. And when I'm even teaching teachers about neuroaffirming classroom management, I use an acronym INSPECT. And the first one, I, is we look at ourselves. So we got to understand ourselves. We got to understand where our triggers are. And especially as therapists, whether educational therapists or psychologists, we can get triggered by those we work with. And so understanding that, but also understanding what their triggers are, helps us to build that more empathetic connection. Acknowledging and validating emotions is huge. Having a growth mindset, oh, we can go on that too, but having that growth mindset, well, this is just the way I am. Or this is the way I've always been doing it, or this is the way I learned how to do it. And so to be empathetic and have that power, we as individuals have to be willing to grow and helping others grow as well. Again, like that student says, well, you haven't learned how to do it yet, the power of yet. We're going to keep growing. We're going to keep stretching. And so at Inclusion Matters, I like to say, not only do we have strengths and challenges, but we have strengths and stretches. Those are those areas that are harder for us, that we may not be naturally inclined, that my brain with ADHD might fight against, but I can keep growing. And so there's this continual tension of, I am valuing and accepting who you are, but I also see that potential in who you can be. And so we're going to have those strengths and stretches. The only way that works in other people's lives is through empathy. And then, as I said before, there is such a huge impact of empathy, a greater impact than we realize, and a greater impact that lasts longer. And I'm just thinking back, sorry, for a moment, of just adults and teachers in my life who had shown empathy. And there's just this sense, I've learned a lot from non-empathetic people in my life, but really what has impacted my soul more than not has been those empathetic connections and reactions, which is why I even became a teacher and got into education, is because I had those teachers who did more than just lecture or sit behind the desk and give worksheets, but they really connected with their students, connected with me. And that legacy is just continuing on and on and on. There's another reason why empathy is so important. And again, we're looking at strength-based whole child, but we have to also look at it from the reality of what our kiddos are facing, especially the kiddos that we're working with. Right now, these are just the latest statistics. Statistics are numbers, they're not people, but I think it gives us a lens into kind of what the situation is that we're engaging with and showing empathy to. 32% of students who receive special education have a specific learning disability. I mean, they have difficulty in reading, writing, math, even all the things that spin off of that. So there are lots of students I know we work with, because that's what you do as educational therapists and what I do as a teacher. who are coming into the environment already feeling that they can't. We see the children we work with, intellectual disabilities, ASD, ADHD, 34%, so that's about 1 in every 3. Many of the children, almost half, have intellectual disabilities plus ASD, ADHD, or both. And then 11% so far are showing ASD and ADHD, now AUDHD. And so we're seeing that end of it, which is the neurodevelopmental part of it. Then we have the experiential part of it with the trauma, which is really, to me, interesting. If you're familiar with the ACEs study, 64% of adults have at least experienced one ACE before 18. 17.3 have experienced 4 or more ACEs. Those ACEs are those adverse childhood experiences, violence, abuse, neglect. They tested, I think, about 10 of them. Now we're just learning more and more and more. And what's interesting for me in terms of the realm of research is how do these two interact? So that's been my side work and obsession lately is how does neurodivergence and trauma interact with each other? What is their relationship to each other? And what does that relationship say to us as educators and therapists and so on and so forth? And how we really can be empathetic supports for those we work with. And as we know physiologically, and I think we talked about this earlier, trauma sets the autonomic nervous system on high alert. So the child is going to feel either hyper-aroused fight or flight instincts or hyper-aroused freeze or faint instincts. And these reactions will play out at home, they will play out in school, they will play out in the therapy sessions. And so we need to be aware of that. Part of empathy is understanding the impact of neurodivergence and trauma on not just learning ability, but on social, emotional, physiological platforms. Very, very, very important. And I like that. Yeah, it's common for neurodivergence to have strengths in these creative domains. And again, that's strengths. And so I think I was watching something just the other day on how corporations and CEOs would do well to hire more neurodivergent individuals. It does better for their company, productivity, creativity, things like that. And then when you look at social emotional struggles, again, ADHD, oppositional defiant disorder is a DSM category, borderline personality disorder. All of these letters are just saying that our kids are struggling not only academically, but they're also struggling socially, they're struggling emotionally. And I don't know about you, but ever since we've been back to school, and probably since you've been back to practice in person since the pandemic, even in my work as a learning needs specialist at a private school these last few years, I've noticed that more of my attention has been in supporting and helping students with these social emotional struggles and getting teachers to understand social emotional struggles than necessarily just the academic or the learning struggles. And I'll just say this, I think it's Heather Forbes created this diagram, and I should have put it in here, but it was a pyramid like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And she puts those social, emotional, safety, physiological safety components there. And then at the top, where Maslow has self-actualization, she actually put in learning, saying that learning in the brain and executive functioning and all of that is not going to take place unless all those other needs are being met. And how do those needs have to be met, even the learning needs? Through empathy. So these conditions are examples of neurodiversity, all of them set the nervous system on high alert. And we know what trauma is. Trauma isn't the experience. Trauma is how the experience is being processed. It's an adaptation, it's a survival. And so when we see kids that are often hyper aroused in fight or flight, they want to get out of the situation, it's because their amygdala and their autonomic nervous system, their vagus nerve is saying, danger, danger, danger. It's not always they're just being defiant or they're trying to get out of the work or they're lazy. And then there's this sense of hypoarousal. Well, there's always sleeping in class. And, you know, what I'm saying is we look at the bigger picture and we just don't make an assumption or put the blame somewhere else. And they happen in all kinds of environments. And so I have the DSM behind me. I've used it in educational settings, especially. But what I want to say in all of this is a bottom-up approach. So we take those basic needs. Does the student, does the child, does the adult feel safe in this environment? And working from that perspective to then strengthen the top down, the cognitive, the executive functioning piece of it. And so, yes, I've seen all your comments, and I'm glad we're all tracking on the same line here, which is incredible. Now, you know, sometimes we look at those statistics and we're like, oh man, you know, ooh, that's rough, and it is rough. But on the flip side, research, especially out of Harvard, is saying that more classroom engagement, higher academic achievement, better communication skills, lower likelihood of bullying, less aggressive behaviors and emotional challenges, and more positive relationships are formed when students are shown what? What are they shown? What makes the difference? That's right, empathy. Now, did I say at the beginning that empathy has power? And it does. It does. So, how does it happen? How does empathy actually forge these connections? So let me give you 3 ideas that I have. Number 1, it fosters a sense of belonging and understanding. Inclusion is so important. And inclusion is something that we've been working on as a culture forever and in education forever. In fact, I saw a video from the 90s where they were talking about the power of inclusive educational settings and how it benefits all students. And yet 30 years later, we're still having these conversations and we're not seeing very much progress. And when we talk about inclusion, it's not just including people. There's a sense of inclusion that ties into sympathy, right? You feel sorry for someone, they're left out, so we'll include you in there. But there's a different level when you start talking about moving from inclusion to belonging. Because when you belong, it's a lot different than being felt sorry for. And we've all, even as adults, have been in those situations, you know, social gatherings, and I'm not really big on big social gatherings. It just produces a lot of anxiety in me, but you know, there's that sense where I'm included in this, you know, I was invited to this social thing, but there's a difference in how I feel, how I respond, how I interact, if I really feel I belong. And what makes it that I feel like I belong? And that is, I'm surrounded by empathy. Okay. Our brains are wired for empathy and connection. That's why Dr. Stephen Porges, when he was developing, and I still have heard him speak many, many times about this fact that our brains are wired for connection and our brains are wired for empathy. And that affects our autonomic nervous system, our vagus nerve. That ventral vagal nerve is that part of us that just loves to be nurtured and connected with and to attach and to find meaning and to find purpose beyond ourselves. And so our brains, as we said, innate, our brains are wired with the capacity and the desire, and well-being comes about when we experience empathetic interactions and connections with others. And empathy is the key to your success as a therapist. There's this article in Cogent Psychology I wanted to read to you. It says, empathy is one of the most consistent outcome predictors in contemporary psychotherapy research. The therapist's ability to identify and relate to patients' experience is considered to be the key element of successful psychotherapy, or you could put educational process. Empathy is one of the most consistent outcome predictors. That ability for us to connect is going to cause whatever it is we're doing to support that person, it's going to cause that process to be far more effective. Understood.org says empathy is also a powerful tool to help you understand what's behind behavior. It can help you and your child work together as a team to handle challenges as they come up, and it can even help you connect during difficult moments. That was written for parents of neurodivergent children. Empathy is that capacity to understand and to resonate. It's connection, something that we cultivate. And so I just want to stop and pause again. I know we have just about over a half hour. I don't want to take up the whole half hour, but I do want to get to the practical stuff. But I did want to stop for a moment and see if anybody had anything that they wanted to put in, or maybe even not in detail, because I know it's hard in the chat, but share an experience from your practice, or even just say, yes, I've seen this work out in my situation. Oh, thank you, Sharon. Anyone else? Well, my hope is that this is resonating and giving us lots to think about. Now, oh, thank you. Finding our own triggers, definitely seen this, resonates. I'm here for you, yes. Now, as you're commenting, and before we get into this last bit about the practical ways that we can put this into practice, as of right now, how comfortable do you feel using any empathetic practices that you know within your educational therapy sessions? And so if you are like, yes, what you're saying is what I'm doing every single time I'm working, or most of the time, feel very comfortable with using different practices that are empathy based, go ahead and put a 5 in the chat. And then 1 is, I'm not even sure what empathy practices are. As I listen to you speaking, I'm like, wow, there needs to be a whole paradigm shift in my practice. You may put a 1. So where are you at in this? All right, seeing some 5. This is amazing. 5s and 4s. Yeah, the resistant kids. Maybe we can talk about that, because again, it's harder to show empathetic practices towards those who aren't receptive towards them. And it is indeed challenging. All right, I appreciate your interaction. That's true. It is harder when you feel they don't like you. Let me ask this question. Some of you have already alluded to it, but what do you perceive as some of the biggest challenges, or the biggest challenge, to practicing empathy-based therapy in your sessions? So I have 1 here, lack of training, meaning that you're not sure yet, and you're learning, and why you come to these conferences and things. maybe emotional overwhelm, because it can become very emotionally overwhelming for us as individuals when we are practicing empathy-based practices. Difficulty in understanding others, 4, fear of how to respond, or 5, others. Oh, I like that, Cara. Leaning into the silence. Yes. That's hard, especially as therapists and teachers, right? When the silence is there, we always want to jump in and guide and prompt and get, but sometimes we just need to, the most empathetic thing we can do in a moment is just to let somebody process. These are great comments. That's a good question. Is it truly empathy if the recipient doesn't receive it? What do you guys think? Is it still empathy? So let's say I'm working with a student who's just very coming every time, doesn't want to work, doesn't want to engage, and we're trying these empathy-based practices. Is it truly empathy? Yeah, it's an invitation, invitation for the dance. I think it is. I think it's still empathy when it's not received, because of where it's coming from, the source. So I'm just sitting here thinking of all the neurodivergent students I work with, have worked with, just thinking about how many of them were so resistant. And so what that did in me is it caused me to really have to think about other strategies I could use, not to manipulate, but to show that I genuinely care and want to help and want to connect. So for example, I had a student who did not want to come in for their specific academic instruction and would refuse just to come. And I felt myself triggered, like, I'm the adult here. You need to come with me. That, you have an IEP. It says that you have to have so many minutes with me. And I just found myself starting to get triggered. And then I started thinking about, okay, let's step back for a moment. What would be a more empathetic response? Maybe this student who's in 5th grade, a 5th grade boy, doesn't feel comfortable because he would be the only one I would be working with, and I want that sense of safety. And so I began to ask myself what might do that. And then so one time I asked him, would you like to bring a classmate with you who doesn't have an IEP? But would you guys like to come together? And that opened the door to him being willing to come with his friend, and again, building that relationship, which then eventually opened up into, them coming in, wanting to hang out at lunch, and just seeing with my paraprofessional, seeing, just how these interactions work and all of that, and just seeing the positivity. So I think the key is that if we're not seeing a response, don't give up. We have to exhibit the same kind of resilience we're asking our kids to have. And again, it's modeling, right? It's showing them how that works. So I've developed a bit of I'm an acronym guy. You guys will figure that out. I love acronyms for some reason, I don't know. But giving empathy a place. So what are 5 basic things to think about? And I've developed this through my own research, through my own experience, again, as a dad, as a teacher, just as a husband, all of these things. And I put it in the form of a funnel because I didn't want it to be a pyramid, like a hierarchy, but I think it's like a funnel, and it's kind of curves around. Sometimes it's going to come back up a little bit and go back down. But let me go through these quickly with you. First thing is, we put aside biases. That's the first place to start. We first of all acknowledge that we have our own biases to situations and to people. We reflect on those preconceived notions, perhaps even stereotypes we have. And then we come to that place of understanding potential impact. And we've talked about that. What can this do? What can this showing empathy do? Well, when you're putting aside all of these biases and assumptions and all of that, then you're going to stimulate a more genuine, trusting, honest engagement, a connection. Okay. And then L, we listen actively. And that's where even that silence comes into play. Tuning into words, emotional cues, body language. That's the head part, is just using our senses to see what's really going on. Thinking of the iceberg, what's going on beneath the surface. And so we're listening for cues. We're not the ones always doing the talking. But when we talk, we want to ask authentic questions. And these are questions that'll gain perspective and foster insight. So we're not just asking questions, maybe at first they're pretty surface because we just want to build that connection, but we're showing that we really do care. It's not like, oh, what kind of things do you like to build on Minecraft? And then our minds just kind of wander off because we don't care. No, we're listening and going, oh, they like this, they like this, they like this. And I'm even thinking, how can I incorporate that into my interactions and my teaching? So we're asking those questions. Again, we're looking at what's beneath the surface. And then we concentrate on strengths. So we're strength-based again. I like what some of you are saying, and how we're responding. And it's okay to be real. Yeah, I get it. That sucks. That's hard. That's difficult. I see that. I see how that frustrates you. But I also see how you are able to do this. And when this came up the other day and we were doing this difficult multi-step math problem, you didn't give up. And so we leverage those strengths. This is what I love about universal design of learning and differentiated learning in education, is you're looking at the strengths of the individual, and you're leveraging those strengths so that they can continue to grow in that safety. Nurturing and leveraging strengths doesn't mean you just make it easy for them to do what they like to do. They have to do those hard things. Remember the stretch. But when those stretches come from their strengths and their likes and their interests, you're going to see amazing things continue to happen. But to an and. Yeah, it's not either or. Sometimes it's even both and. And then we engage and empower. And that's really why we do what we do, I think, is we want to engage with families and students and others, and we want to empower them to thrive. So that's kind of the background of it all, right? You're giving empathy a place. You're setting up an environment and a perspective of your own soul that will allow empathy, that ability to take root and to grow and to flourish. So what does that look like professionally? Again, I think it's enhanced listening. Listening, and asking those questions that promote reflection, that promote open-ended thought, coming at it again without bias, using and being very careful of our language. That's something that I have been very cognizant about in myself, is the language, the words that I use. The words I allow my students and my children to use. Language is powerful, and so is validation. We may not agree, but we're validating. What you're feeling right now is important. I see you, I hear you. We take the perspectives of others and we collaborate. I think as adults, again, therapists and teachers, it's easy for us to come in with a lesson plan and saying, I'm going to show you how to solve your problem, versus how can we collaborate together? How can we work together to problem solve? Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to empower them, not just to give them a skill or what we think they need, but also to empower them to know what they need, and then how are they going to be able to get what they need. And then for us, I'm just going to throw this out, mindfulness, reflection, if it's habits of prayer or whatever it is, we need to take care of ourselves. I find that, if I'm not taking care of myself and I'm running on empathy and I don't have compassion and empathy on myself, all of those things are going to affect how I interact with others. Setting boundaries, very important. And then we're there to support and empower. We're not there just to fix people or problems, so we don't mandate with just do this and everything will be great. But like we talked about before with the language, so you want to start looking into language and how we can reframe questions. And it sounds like you're having a hard time. Let's talk about this. Let's think about this. What do you think about? Would this work? And so we're really engaging in a two-way connection, because that's what connection is, right? It's not just a one, I'm here, I'll help you. Again, now we're going to get into that pity and sympathy. Well, you need me because I have all this knowledge and skill, but no, let's go on this journey together. And so just think for a moment. Just do a reflection, a self-evaluation. How is your place in therapy? When parents come in, when students come in, as adults come in who need therapies, how is your place? How are you doing putting aside those biases? How are you listening? How are you asking questions? How are you celebrating strengths? And how are you engaging and empowering others? It's good, Sharon. Lastly, I want to focus on this ripple effect. How can we see empathy continue not just to grow in our lives and those we work with, but can really have an impact on those around us, our communities, the homes our children live in, their classrooms? What is the ripple effect of empathy? What can it be? So I developed 4 things I think are just helpful. Engage in, vote. Yes, that has a big impact. Find empathetic people to lead us. Continue to do what you're doing here. Engage in professional development. And I would even say, don't just be, a recipient. Share what you're learning with others. There are ways to show and model empathy to people who are not always empathetic, and to teach them as well. So just think about your own growth, but how can you stimulate that growth in others, that it goes beyond you? Community outreach, just getting involved in community. Where I live a few years ago, we had it was a Lego themed event for from the Autism Society in our area, and they invited lots of people, and they were educational therapists. As I said, I have a connection with a educational therapist who's been doing it for probably like 40 years. She was out there and just letting people know and getting the word out, being able to attend community events. There's a lot there. Advocate for inclusive policies. That's the voting. That's for on the local level, on the bigger level, global level, and then research and reflect. I know as teachers and therapists, that part is important, that academic research and reflection. Always learning, always looking at what works, what's evidence-based, what's empathetic-based. The energy that we bring with us to every interaction, whether we're at the store, I love that, or at the gas station, or out at the park. Maybe you're out at the park and you're just enjoying a day at the park, and you see a mom whose toddler just keeps screaming and falling on the ground crying or throwing rocks or whatever, and you could tell she's getting really, really flustered. Those are the times to come over and not say, well, if you would just, but hey, I get it, this is tough. Showing that empathy and connection there, wherever we're at. And so our shared mission, I believe, as we close out, is very profound yet simple. We want to create a nurturing space where every child, regardless of their differences, can thrive. And I believe that through empathetic practice and a collective vision for systemic change, that we can edge closer to a more inclusive and understanding society. Just a quick side note, I think my wife posted this on our Instagram page, but we had gone to a local restaurant and it was very difficult. In fact, we didn't even see at first how someone in a wheelchair would be able to access that restaurant, because there was this step that you had to walk up at the entrance before you even got to the door from the curb. And we're like, well, why wouldn't they have just built a ramp there? And so we went in and asked, we said, this is important because, people who have to use a wheelchair or other means have a difficulty, which my father-in-law, he has to use a wheelchair. We have to push him in the wheelchair because he has difficulty walking. And they're like, well, no. But, they showed us, but you had to go through this gate that you wouldn't even have known even opened. It looked like the fence on everything else. And, it's those conversations that we're having and bringing awareness to about being more inclusive. And then carrying the insight and strategies we're gleaning today and throughout our professional development into our practice, but also, as we said, into our communities and beyond. And that is just an amazing thing. So with that said, I want to say thank you for this time. And now we have about 15 minutes for questions and answers. So here we go. What do you think about NVC, nonviolent communication, and teaching, practicing it in school, as well as the NVC? Honestly, that's the first time I've heard of that. So I want to look into that and find out some more. Cara, can you maybe expand a little bit? Maybe what, if you know
that
what
was Sharon's question, and she's been very active in the chat, so I have a feeling she'll put in more about that. I know nonviolent communication is a program. I haven't been through it myself, but I know a couple of colleagues who have, and they say really great things about it. I know it reflects a lot of the things that you've talked about in how you communicate with others. So I think there might be something specific that Sharon was thinking about. But do you want to go to the next question, and I can just have some more about that in the chat come up?
Yeah, all I will say is that, if it has, from what it looks like, first of all, I'm all for nonviolent communication, 100%. I think if you're talking about, using our voices, restorative justice, empathetic interactions, facilitating that in different environments without knowing specifically what the program is, I would say yes. There are a lot of good, powerful programs that are out there that are based on what we've been talking about. Honestly, I wish there were more. And so I'm hoping that through this and through what I can contribute, we can see more. So take whatever you have and start spreading it out, because that's super important. So yes, addressing the misconception that people on the spectrum lack empathy. We are in the process right now of having one of our kiddos assessed for autism. And we went to a specific autism spectrum center. And our child went through all the 2 days, full days of just interviews and assessments and all of that. And we just had our meeting with them the other day. And I will tell you that I was extremely disappointed. In fact, I wasn't very empathetic. I was probably pretty angry because the psychologists and all the therapists sat there and said, well, your child can't have autism because 1, they make eye contact. 2, they can communicate. 3, they don't talk in this funny high pitch, and went through all kind of the stereotypical things of autism. And I just said, stop. Like, it's called a spectrum, right? And if you've met one kid with autism, you've met one kid with autism. And I said, look, I have students who are on the spectrum who look at me. I mean, I had a student in 5th grade the other day sit down, giving me full eye contact, and he was teaching me Arabic. He's learning Arabic on his own because he wanted to learn a language that was challenging. So I think the misconception that people on the spectrum lack empathy is I gotta be careful what I say here. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's a misconception. I have seen and I have known, and I've even suspected myself, I might be on the spectrum. That's a whole nother story, but I have seen some of the most selfless, compassionate acts that I wish all of us could see and learn from, and feel a bit of embarrassment that we don't have that kind of same empathy. And so I understand that there are some people who are on the spectrum who may struggle more with empathy, but I don't believe that they can never be empathetic. I don't believe they can't grow in their empathy. And so, sorry about that. I got so passionate, I changed the screen. And so, yes, so I think you address it by one, saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. You tell them that it's a spectrum, okay? And yes, it is neurological. Yes, there are commonalities. Yes, there are ways that we can understand what's going on in an individual. But PESI just put on an autism conference online where Dr. Stephen Porges, who again is the polyvagal theory guru, did a whole presentation on polyvagal theory, safety, everything we're talking about here, empathy, and working with children with autism. And so it was powerful. I don't have time. That could probably be a whole nother presentation I could give you, but I would just say address it when you can in an empathetic way, but in a very passionate way. Can you talk about the connection between empathy and restorative justice? We need more restorative justice practice, especially at schools. I'm seeing punishments doled out, but I don't see us as adults doing a good job of teaching children how to be restorative. I had opportunity the other day to work with a couple students in my class who were having an issue. And what I did is I've just brought empathy into the conversation. Because a lot of times it's like, well, I didn't mean to make you feel that way or whatever, but I said, you know what? They felt that way and they were hurt by what you said. And even though you didn't really mean it to be that hurtful, because of your relationship with your friend, it made them feel a certain way. And I want you to understand that. And so we took time, and I took time to guide them and lead these fourth graders through the restorative justice practice so that they understood that when you hurt somebody, it is a big deal and we need to make it right. Let's see here. Parent teacher effectiveness training. Yes, we need more of that. I'm gonna look that up because I want to find out more about nonviolent communication, a language of life-changing tools for healthy relationships. Yeah, I definitely want to be looking into that. Some links there, which are great.
Do you mind putting your last slide that has your email up so people can?
Yeah, absolutely. Here we go.
Thank you.
If you have more questions or you have resources, because again, I have a growth mindset, so I want to learn. So you guys are experts in your field. I want to hear what you guys are learning, or if you have questions or you want to find out more about what Inclusion Matters Education Services is all about. There's our email at hello@inclusionmattersed.com. You can follow me on Instagram at IMESDoc or at Inclusion Matters Ed. And to break it down, really, we focus on one big thing and we do it in 4 particular ways. And our big thing is to equip and empower parents and educators to be able to empower neurodivergent students to learn and thrive at school and in life. So that's our big thing. It's just getting those people who have impact to have that impact on students who are neurodivergent or may just have different, again, we're getting into this whole trauma field, so on and so forth. So we do that in 4 different ways. Number 1, we do assessments. And yes, I do some traditional assessments, but I'm starting to find and even develop some other more neuroaffirming assessments, because not all assessments that are out there are very neuroaffirming strength based. But we try to help parents understand, at least get a clearer picture of what might be going on with the strengths and stretches of their child. We do advocacy services, and so I do advocate for students' needs, as well as do consulting with schools and professional development, and speak at events like this to make people more aware of neuroaffirming practices. I do some whole child coaching, which would be kind of like educational therapy. I probably shouldn't have said that, because you do something far more important and in depth that I don't.
Similar crossovers, we'll put it that way.
Okay, we'll put it that way. So I started out just doing executive functioning coaching, but then I was like, no, whole child. And so, tying together again the approach of the head, hands, and heart. And then lastly, we try to foster community, because we know as parents and educators, and even as therapists and professionals, it can get pretty lonely and overwhelming out there. And so having others who are like-minded on the journey, just trying to get them connected as well.